Hey now, today we're going to take a look at Dungeons & Dragons Attack Wing from WizKids, specifically the starter set, which has 3 dragons in it, which means you can play with up to 3 players if you only have the starter set, but there's lots of expansion packs to buy. Even they're already out right now, even though the starter set just came out. What this is a miniatures game where you take control of these iconic creatures from the Dungeons & Dragons setting, specifically the Forgotten Realms, although the story doesn't really matter for this game. And you have a set play area, 3x3, where you place your miniatures and you use this system called the flight path system to move around the board, try to get into range of your opponents, and use your attacks and spells and all these different things to take out your opponent. The last one left standing is the winner. Now, this is the latest game in the flight path system. The very first game to use it was Wings of War, I believe, which was a historical World War II game where you took control of fighter planes using the same flight path system. Then Fantasy Flight had X-Wing Miniatures, which is by far the most popular game using the system at this point, where you have all the control, of course, of all these different ships from the Star Wars universe, X-Wings, TIE Fighters, Millennium Falcon, all of these different things. Then WizKids licensed the system from Fantasy Flight to make Star Trek Attack Wing, which used, what else? The ships from Star Trek, and now they're using that same system for Dungeons & Dragons. And I'll take a brief moment here to answer a question I was asked before for one of my Q&As, which is, why have I not actually reviewed or talked about or anything with those other flight path games? Well, I have no interest in Wings of War, so forget about that. But why not X-Wing and Star Trek? These are both very popular games, especially X-Wing. They have cool sci-fi themes. They should be right up my alley, except that they're kind of not. I'm not that into miniatures games. I know I have a lot of board games that have a heavy focus on miniatures, and I know I have the battle boxes for War Machine, but really, I'm not like a huge miniatures guy, and I didn't want to get into another collectible game, and honestly, I'm not really a Trekkie, and I'm not that into Star Wars. They're both fine. I like them. They're not bad, but I'm not obsessed with them, and I'm certainly not going to buy a game that only has the starships from either of those series, because that's like the least interesting aspect of them to me. I enjoy like the Jedi stuff and the world building and the scoundrels of Star Wars. That's why Imperial Assault is probably going to appeal much more to me. And for Star Trek, the ships are probably a much bigger deal in that show, but still it's about the characters for me. So I wasn't really interested in those sets. But for Dungeons & Dragons, I was interested because I have a history with D&D of moving those miniatures around a battle map and playing out these role-playing scenarios. And there's no role-playing in this box whatsoever, but still having all these different iconic creatures and having it be a fantasy bent, even despite the, aside from the fact that it's Dungeons & Dragons in particular, I prefer fantasy over sci-fi. So this is the one that really caught my eye and that I really wanted to try to see what this flight path nonsense was all about. So I played it a few times. Let's go ahead and take a brief look at how it's played, and we're going to come back and I'll let you know what I think. Okay, the play area I have in which to show you D&D Attack Wing is obviously much smaller than what it should be. It should be a 3x3 play area, and I have everything kind of cramped here for the sake of the camera. But I just want to give you a brief taste of how this is all going to run down. Now, the goal of the game is to knock out your opponents. In the base set, all you have are these 3 dragons. You have a red dragon, a copper dragon, and a blue dragon. They actually have names: a Shadra, Belagos, and this one is called Galaderos. And they all have the different special abilities. If you're familiar with the D&D system, then you'll actually know their different stats and the different types of breath weapons that they have. And here I'll give you a closer look at them. Now, any game in the flight path system uses these plastic bases, and you're going to have to kind of do a little bit of construction ahead of time and putting their tile in the bottom that has their stats. On the other side are actually generic stats, but this is what you use for the normal one. So there's a Shadra, there's Belagos, pretty cool there. And here is Galaderos, the copper dragon. So when you start the game, we'll just kind of assume this is a game that's in mid-progress, but you'd have your 3x3 play area, and you'd set them up, and you'd go to your different corners of the map. This game can be played with 2 or 3 players in the starter set. and then things are going to begin. Now, we'll just go ahead and jump right into how the phases of the game works. The first thing is you have to decide how you're going to move. Remember that your goal is to take out your opponents, so you're going to want to get closer to them in order to take them out, either with your ranged weapons or your melee attacks. How you decide your movement is used through these maneuver dials and these cards that corresponds to your character. So you'll have this little card that has all of your different maneuvers. You also have your own stat card as well with your attack value and your agility, which is that you use to dodge, your health and your armor, which can deflect hits, as well as special abilities. There's points if you want to go through legion building and all that different types of stuff, and your natural weapons, which tells you the range and what they are, as well as different upgrade cards, which I'll get back to in a minute. But first you have to decide how you're going to move, so you'll refer to your movement card, and all the different arrows and colors here actually refer to all of these different templates. How the flight path system works is that once each player is going to refer to that card and refer to their little dial here, which has all the different symbols matching up on that card, you'll choose what your movement's going to be. So let's say that in this case, a Shadra is going to do this 3 hard turn. Then you're going to take the applicable templates, which I had to dig for. Here it is. And on the bottom of the bases, there's a little indentation. So obviously you're not allowed to pick up and readjust the miniatures as you play. You're actually going to, depending on what maneuver you chose, which in this case it was this way, you're going to hold your mini, slide the template into your base, hold that in place, and then you're going to move your dragon to the other side of that. And that's it. That is as simple as it is. That's how you use the flight path system. There's a lot of different sizes. One of the longest ones is a 6 movement. You also have ones that will allow you to actually do a 180 flip. So for instance, if you were to choose this maneuver, let's say that the red dragon, Balagos, did that for some reason. Slide that in. Then I would get to go around to the other side, lock in, and move around 180 degrees. And if I don't do a maneuver like that, it can be actually very difficult to turn around because you're just going to do, you're basically gliding. So you have to move around very slowly and do wide turns in order to get around to the position that you're trying to be in. The ultimate goal is to get your opponent in your crosshairs. You have a cone at the base of your miniature here, which tells you your attack vector. You have different types of attacks. They might be a line, they might be a cone, but you always need to have them within your sights, whether it's in the back or front, depending on the type of attack. And then you'll actually have to make use of the range stick here. Yes, there's a lot of sticks in this game. And the range stick will have 1 through 4 listed on the stick, depending on what the range of your attack is. If your attack is range 3, then your opponent needs to be within range 3 of you. If it's all the way out at range 4, they actually get an extra defense dice for being so far away. But we're getting a bit ahead of ourselves. That's how the moves work. Everyone locks in, then each player moves, and then after you get done moving, actually before it goes on to the next player in their movement, you get to take an action. Now there's several different basic actions that you can take, and a lot of them have to do with taking tokens in order to prep your character. So for instance, if you wanted to do the dodge action, you would take one of these dodge tokens and place it next to your character. Now, that means that during your, for the rest of the turn, you can have the option of using that token in order to add a dodge result to your dice roll, which we'll go back to in a minute. You also have different types of, you have the, oops, I just knocked the red dragon out of her base. How dare I? Here we go. We'll fix that. Maybe. There you go. You have the target icon, which is a token which is actually going to be used for attacking an enemy instead. You can use this and reroll as many of your attack dice as you wish during your combat if you take the target action in order to take that. You only get 1 action to do this, so you have to choose wisely what you're going to do. And instead of doing that, you could actually use one of the abilities on your upgrade cards. These can be used, purchased using different points you start off building your army with, or just the side presets that you want to each start with. So for instance, the Devotrix of Tiamat here, as your action, instead of doing one of those other things like targeting or concentrating, you can disable this upgrade and place a time token, a duration token on it. You get to, from then on, you get a continuous effect. You get to +1 attack die against every creature you attack in your forward arc. During each of these attacks, you may reroll all of your blank results 1 time. Now, what it means by disabling it, you actually physically put a disable token on it, which means that in the future, in order to use this ability again, you have to spend an action just to remove that disable token. But even before that, you have to wait until the duration tokens are removed from it. This is also something you have to worry about with the breath weapons that each dragon gets, which are very powerful. They let you do ranged attacks. This one says a range of 4, and this one lets you shoot out a line of lightning, but you have to place 3 duration tokens on it afterwards, which means that you're not going to be able to use it for quite a while because you only remove 1 duration token during your end phase during every round. So once everyone gets done moving and taking their actions that they want to do, and you can choose not to take an action if you don't want to, then we get into the combat phase, which is where that range ruler comes into play. And if your opponent was within range and sight of you, then you're going to get to do an attack action, which can either be one of your natural weapons, which for the dragons is going to be a tail or bite within 2. So if this red dragon here is within 2, I'd get to use one of my primary weapons. If my breath weapon was available to me, I'd be able to see if I was the copper dragon here, and I had my breath weapon available to me, I'd be able to hit either of them, and so on. You'll take your actions in order. Someone attacks, and the next person, and I think descending level order attacks, and so on. How attacks work, some of the cards will tell you specifically how many dice to roll. Most of them will refer to your primary attack value, which is the red sword icon on your character card. So you'll refer to that. So let's say that a Shadra was attacking the red dragon here. Her primary attack value is 4, so she'll take 4 of these attack dice, which are different from the defense dice. And then her opponent is, let's see, the red dragon, is going to refer to her card and only gets to roll her agility. Let's go ahead and say that that's 2. I don't have her card out right now. With any bonuses that she has. Now what you're trying to do here is the attacker is trying to roll hits and the defender is trying to roll dodges that will cancel out those hits. So each of these little diamond or star icons is a hit. Then all the blank faces are, of course, misses. The concentrate icons, the little eye here, are only used when you take use the concentrate token to change those into hits. Concentrate is another action you can do. And you have the critical hits, which are pretty nasty. On the dodge dice, again, you have the blank faces and the concentrate sign, but you also have these dodges, which you're going to use to cancel out those crits. So let's go ahead and say that that's my attack roll. I have 2 crits. Let's just go ahead and say that's a crit, actually, for the purposes of this example. And then for my defense, okay, I only have 1 dodge, which means I was only able to cancel out 1 of these hits. And the way that this works is that you must cancel out normal hits before you can start canceling out crits. So I'm taking 1 normal hit and 1 critical hit. That's where I go to the damage deck. Now for every normal hit that gets through as a defender, I just take 1 of these cards face down, and that counts as a point against me. Your health value is very simply your whatever your health is, your yellow icon on your card. Now you also have armor, which let's just go ahead and say for this example that I rolled more hits, so my armor didn't come into play, but your armor would soak up an amount of damage that gets through after you get done dodging. Well, let's say for this example it didn't get through, so I take 1 hit and I take a critical hit as well, which means not only do I have to take another card that counts as a point of damage against me and might knock me out of the game, but I have to take that card face up. And on the other side of this, you have negative effects. So Panicked here says that you roll -1 attack die and -1 defense die in combat. As an action, you can flip this card face down, which lets you become unpanicked essentially, but you still have a point of damage against you. You also have Shattered, which is going to break your armor tokens, which means you flip them face down and you're not able to use them for armor unless it gets repaired by a special ability. So that's why crits are really, really bad and why you can't cancel them out all that easily. Once you get done with all of this, assuming you are not the last dragon left standing, you're going to do the cleanup phase, which is where you remove duration tokens from your upgraded cards. Any tokens that you did not use that you used with your actions like defense, dodge tokens and concentrate tokens get removed, and then you do it all over again. You go back to moving your dragons, taking actions, and doing attack actions if applicable. That's D&D Attack Wing. Well, I am very sorry to say that I actually like Attack Wing D&D quite a bit. Why am I sorry to say that? Because it means I have to buy more of it, and I don't want to. But the acquisition disorder is kicking in. I'm already thinking, man, how cool is that green dragon going to be? The expansion pack for the green dragon. I gotta get that thing now the next time I make a cool stuff run. So I like the game. It's pretty cool. It's, you know, the fact that this is so cool, rather than making me want to go out and try X-Wing and Star Trek now, completely eliminates any even lingering desire I had to play those games, because this one is certainly going to fill whatever this niche happens to be, miniature air combat. And that's one thing I'd like to stress too before we go any further, is that obviously I've only played with the starter set. I haven't played with any of the other units, including a lot of the ground units. And there's a lot of those available right now, or at least it seemed that way to me, like hobgoblin units, elves, wizards, things like that. I am not really interested in those. I love the idea of flying around as dragons. That is what appealed to me in the first place, and I think that's enough for me. And you might say, well, you can't make an entire system out of just dragons. You have not played 3rd edition D&D, because there are so many dragons available in that system. And if you only made this entire game out of dragons, I'd be so happy. They're not going to do that. They haven't done that, and that's sad to me. I want them to focus only on that. But because of that, though, regardless, I'm just not interested in ground units that much. I don't know if I will try them anyways, just to see. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they're gameplay-wise, they're so cool that I just can't live without them. But for now, where it's at is the dragons. And also, I want to see griffins. I want to see beholders. I want to see all the flying units. That's what appeals to me the most. But moving on, let's talk about components. Now, WizKids gets a lot of flack for their components, that their miniatures aren't as good as other companies. I'm not a miniature savant. I think they look pretty darn good. Now, I used to play D&D for a very long time, and so I had a lot of the D&D miniatures that WizKids had been putting out. No, I'm sorry. It was Wizards of the Coast that was putting out. I get those confused sometimes. And those were pretty good. They were okay. They had droopy stabs, things like that. I would say this is probably a little bit better than that quality, which means it's pretty darn good for me, and I like them. Especially the red dragon looks really, really cool. These are not miniatures that are going to break anytime soon. They have some bendiness to them, but nothing that detrimental. Well, especially the blue dragon is actually my favorite, because blue dragons were always my favorite in D&D, of the evil dragons at least. So happy to see that represent here. And so I like the miniatures, and all the other components, the chits, the cards, the artwork, all look really, really good. No complaints there. A+. As far as the theme, this is not the most thematic game ever. It's not really meant to be. This is not going to give you D&D in a box role-playing. It's not even on the level of Descent as far as the storyline goes. Now, there is like an adventure mode and campaign mode that you can do. I didn't do any of that, and it doesn't seem all that interesting to me, because you're really just going after objectives. And sure, you can do role-playing, you can put whatever you want into the game. That's not really why I'm interested in playing it. It gives me enough of that D&D theme just through the mechanics and the gameplay and looking at the cool miniatures, without having to worry too much about that other stuff like role-playing. Especially when it comes to the spells and powers, which I'll get back to in a second, like Shield and Magic Missile. I'm like, wow, that really brings me back to my D&D days. So I like that stuff. And so there's enough theme here for me. As far as the gameplay, I was surprised. Let me say this again. I've never played the other Flight Path games, so this is going to sound like someone who's, if you have played those and enjoyed them, I'm going to sound like I lived under a rock for the last 5-10 years or whatever. But I really enjoyed the Flight Path system itself and how movement works. I was like, templates, how is this going to work? It's going to be kind of a fiddly nonsense. No, it's actually rather simple, and it works really, really well. You decide what template you want to use. You only have a certain amount of them available to you depending on which unit that you're using. And then you go, and the fun part is not knowing how your opponent's going to move, and not knowing, how completely you can screw up based on your movement, because you just don't know, and you're trying to. This is the combat aspect that's really, really fun, trying to deduce what your opponent's going to do. I like that whole aspect of it. If it was just, okay, I move here. Oh, you move there? Okay, then let me lock in my movement and I'll move. No, the fact that you have to lock them both in simulates real combat, and it works really, really well. It does mean that there's a learning curve for how that's going to work and how to make optimal moves, but still, that's part of the fun of it as well. So I really enjoy the maneuvering, which is most of the fun of this game. So we'll just go through the different phase structure, the different actions that you can do. The sort of what I call the prep actions, taking the target tokens, taking the concentrate tokens, the charge token. Those are okay. That's where some of the strategy comes in, is sort of stockpiling, but really actions for future turns. Or let me say it another way. It's prepping for your attack action should the worst happen, I guess is what you could call that. But really where the fun comes in is in your upgrade cards. And you can do this a couple of different ways. They have some presets that you can use in the book, which is how we played our games. But if you really want to get into it and dig into it, in the Legion building, you can actually decide how many points you want to use, which is how most miniatures games are played, and decide what upgrade cards you're going to use. I haven't delved into that yet, but I just like picking the cool cards like Shield and Magic Missile that I mentioned earlier, and the different breath weapons and the slow breath, and lots of fun stuff, and using your actions for those are infinitely more interesting than taking a target token, although some spells require you to use certain tokens, which is a neat aspect too. But I love all those different powers and abilities. It makes you feel distinct and different from your opponents when you take different types of powers. That's a little bit of the fiddliness of the game comes in when you have to keep track of the duration tokens and take them off during the cleanup phase and all that, but it's not so bad. When you first pull all the stuff out and you see the rule book, which is unusually thick for how simple this game actually is, you can be intimidated, but it's really quite simple. After like your first round of play, you're going to be like, okay, I think that's it. I think we just do everything we just did over again. And it's just that simple, and I like that. So once you see all those tokens, and especially when it comes to the upgrade cards, you can be intimidated, but don't worry about it. Going to the attack phase, this is probably the one area where I have some mixed feelings about it. It's cool trying to get someone into your... Actually, aiming is probably most of the fun in this phase. Trying to get someone into your attack arc and deciding which attack to use. That's a lot of fun. Using things strategically. Do I want to use a spell instead? Is it better to use Magic Missile now? I might not do as much damage. Stuff like that. That is really cool. What I don't like, I mean, it's okay. It's not a deal breaker for me, but it is this is the most random part of the game by far. Because you could it doesn't matter what you do, it doesn't matter how you prep, you could just roll horribly on your turn and be totally screwed. Unless you prep exactly right, or unless you have some killer ability, I mean, you can just get totally screwed by the dice roll. That is not a deal breaker for me, but I think that aspect of the game is going to determine, for a lot of people watching this, whether or not you're going to even be okay with trying this game. That amount of randomness can be killer. When it works for you, it works for you. When it doesn't, it's like, like you can't do anything. That can be a little bit frustrating. I think that it's not that bad, and the other aspects of the game make up for it, but it's something to keep in mind. You can take things like the concentrate tokens and the target tokens to make that better, but again, you're using your precious action to do that, where you might be better served using it for your upgrade card actions. There's a little bit of balance there, but it can also be frustrating. And when you just want those dice to work for you. So that's the core meat of the game, and it's a lot of fun. There's some other little aspects that are kind of neat, how you can't just move willy-nilly around the board, but you have to keep in mind what actions are going to exhaust you. And like I said, I didn't get too deep into the Legion building or adventure mode or getting ground units, but even out of the box, it's a lot of fun. Now, out of the box, it has been designed in such a way that you will, if you like it, you will want to get more stuff immediately, because that's just the kind of game it is. You will tire of the abilities and upgrade cards that come in the starter set, and you're going to want more and more and more. So if you don't want to get into another collectible game, or your first collectible game, then don't do it. There's other games that are very fun that don't require you to, make this commitment of time and money purchasing more and more and more expansion packs. But if you're okay with that, this is a lot of fun. For me, I'm probably going to fall down somewhere in the middle. I'm not going to buy every expansion pack. I'm going to buy the ones with super cool flying miniatures and have them work against each other, because it is a cool game. I really like the flight path system. I like the attacks. I like the little thematic elements of D&D and having giant monsters fight against each other. That is a lot of fun. If you hate randomness, you may not like it. If you like the other flight path games or any other type of miniature games, definitely try it. A lot of this is going to come down to theme. If you have been holding off buying one of these games using this system like I was because you didn't like the sci-fi theme but you like fantasy a lot, this should definitely be on your radar. If you like all these different types of themes, you still might want to try it. A lot of fun. Dungeons & Dragons attack thing, 2 thumbs up.